back from the All-Star break. Awesemo.com NBA strategy show. Myself, Ben Razza, here with the man. Ship My Money, coming in hot from the hockey ranks here. Congratulations. Saw the screenshot. Must have been a nice All-Star break for you to top it off last night.
Thanks. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. A lot more enjoyable than NBA's been for me recently. So, it's nice, I guess, to have like momentum going back into what I think is my best sport.
Debatable. Yeah, I mean, it was the Rangers, which was cool. Right before the show, we just found out that one of the Rangers' goals should have been scored a little differently. Would have changed the whole thing. So you're running pretty pure. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, definitely very happy with what time the games ended last night and when DraftKings finalized stats last night.
Yes, that happens. It happens. But we do want to say, of course, Super Draft sponsoring the show. Obviously, all you guys know they've been changing the game, the multiplier mode, just a different way to play. No salaries. We're going to talk about that throughout the show. If you haven't signed up, use the promo code AWESEMO. You can get $23 on top of your deposit of $100 or more. We'll be talking about those multipliers throughout. We get a nice 6-gamer, I guess, to ease back in. Other than the hockey, did you play NASCAR? Did you play anything else like equally egregious, or did you just play hockey?
Played online poker, but
online poker, that's more egregious than any of the sports.
I spent way too much time playing. I didn't go to the bar the entire All-Star break, which is very unusual for me, but I'm not sure that it was really like any healthier or anything because I just played a ridiculous amount of online poker.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole, every time I go back to poker, I burn out within like 12 hours.
Yep.
So there is that, but like I said, we've got 6 games. We can get into it. I do want to say that, last thing I want to say, did you watch any of the dunk contest, the 3-point shootout, any of that stuff?
Watched the 3-point shootout, had the dunk contest on. I mean, I watched it, but I was doing like other stuff too. Didn't watch any of the All-Star game.
Yeah, I was basically the same way. I said on, I believe this show and on the betting show, Buddy Hield. Did I bet Buddy Hield? No. Real genius move over here.
Yeah, nice call. I bet Bertans.
Yeah, I know you did, but I just so sick. Anyway, that's enough complaining. Bucks,
what were the odds on Hield?
I saw it around 5, 4.5, 5.
Yeah.
Would have been nice. Could have used that, especially with some of the demolition that's been happening in the college basketball world. Again, it's another show for another time. Milwaukee, 13-point favorite on the road, 225 total, going into Detroit, who they're losing players left and right. Reggie Jackson, not going to be there. Probably be in the Clippers soon enough. Obviously, no Drummond, no play. I don't want to call it tank mode, but they're just in a terrible spot. So it's a massive spread to get us started. Obviously, guys like Bruce Brown, Derrick Rose, Christian Wood, these are names we're going to talk about on the Detroit side. What do you make of the hometown Pistons with their depleted roster?
Yeah, so on one hand, it obviously opens the door for increased opportunities, increased playing time for guys. But it's also, I think, going to be interesting and something that you're going to want to pay attention to in these first couple of games, how exactly their new rotation looks. Because on one hand, you look at someone like Derrick Rose. On one hand, obviously, the entire offense now is going to run through Derrick Rose when you don't have Reggie Jackson on the floor, you don't have Drummond, you don't have Griffin. So he's going to get opportunities just to do whatever he wants when he's out there. But on the other hand, you're clearly not talking about a basketball team that's trying to be competitive right now. So what's the rotation look like? How deep is it? How many minutes does Derrick Rose actually continue to play? I think is the biggest concern for him. So with his price tag where it is, I think even if you expect somewhere around 26, 27 minutes, he has some upside in a pace-up spot against Milwaukee. Obviously, he could play more than that. We'd been seeing him play north of 30 minutes before his most recent injury. So I think that he's cheap enough that he's worth taking a shot on. But you do want to pay close attention to these rotations because they could just get really deep. They could give more minutes to guys like Jordan Bone, who they're calling up, and some other guys. So pay attention to that. I think that Christian Wood is someone who should be pretty secure as far as playing time goes because he's young. They want to see what they have in him. And he's also a productive player from a fantasy standpoint. So he stands out as the number one guy for me from the Pistons. Bruce Brown should get more minutes while all these guys are out. But Dwayne Casey did talk about not wanting Bruce Brown to be the primary ball handler. He said that he thinks the days of Brown being the point guard or the backup point guard are pretty much over. So that will, or most likely will, decrease the assist opportunities for Brown. But at the same time, he should get at least a little bit more in the way of usage without without Jackson, without Drummond.
Yeah, I mean, Rose, I'll echo those points. He's 5.5 on FanDuel, 5.9K on DraftKings. He's obviously, if you talk about like rebuilding, seeing what guys can do, that doesn't really fit into the plans. I'm not saying he can't play, as you mentioned. We've seen him cross 30 minutes. I'm not saying that's not possible, but I'm a little hesitant. And then again, to echo your thoughts on Christian Wood, he's the exact type of guy that they should be incentivized to play. They want to see he could easily be a part of whatever they're going to try to do. I feel pretty good about that. Do you worry just about the matchup in general? Obviously, with the Bucks, sizable favorites here.
Yes, just because the Bucks are obviously the far superior team and they're a good defensive team, but at the same time, the pricing is cheap enough on Detroit, and you do get the extra possessions because of the pace up spot that I'm not overly concerned about it.
Fair enough. Anyone else on the Pistons? Is there any kind of cheaper guys besides the ones we've talked about that you may look to? I mean, 6 games, you kind of have flexibility. You don't have the most options you're going to see on a slate, but at the same time, it's not a 2 or 3 gamer where we have to force ourselves into spots.
I think that Svi at 3,200 on DraftKings looks pretty good. He's not a guy that I like rostering because his range of outcomes isn't really that wide. It's tough for him to have monster games, but he should get upper 20s in minutes, and he is near the minimum salary.
See, man, I will say our NBA chat, a lot of friendly people, everyone congratulating you. No talk of a scandal from your NHL shenanigans.
So I'm actually not 100% sure. Maybe that might have actually.
Now, yeah, backtracking.
Well, I did get like an extra assist for Zibanejad after that game ended. I don't know if that was the scoring change or what.
Just keep telling yourself that. What they want you to think.
I'm looking now to see how many goals he had and how many goals.
The blue shirts, they're actually playing better, but that's, again, neither here nor there. On the other side, no surprise, Bucks sizable favorites. Giannis, this is superstar rich slate. We'll, of course, talk about the Rockets. We've got Trae Young. I mean, Giannis is a monster. He doesn't play as many minutes maybe as someone like Harden, but his production is massive. Even with a potential blowout, I assume that you like him quite a bit.
Yeah, Dan and I talked about it a bit on the podcast last night, and obviously the concerns you run into are that the Bucks are just so much better than most teams they play. The Pistons certainly included in that, and on top of the normal risk that you run in blowouts where the star you'll lose a few minutes, the Bucks tend to do a really good job of resting Giannis in games within the game when it's not competitive as well. So you don't even get more than 25, 26 minutes sometimes, but he's far and away the best per minute fantasy producer in the league. He's around 1.85 DraftKings points per minute, even with a fully healthy Milwaukee team. So there's obviously some chance that he gets full run and gets you like 31, 32 minutes here, which would be great. And then there's some number of times where he doesn't get full run, but he's more productive than normal, and you're still happy with the score. And the thing that really stands out to me is that he is only 11,100 on DraftKings. So you're not really paying the premium for him that you normally would. He's in that same price range with James Harden. So I think Giannis does look really good, especially against what should be a pretty weak interior defense for Detroit as well.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Of course, it's early, what ownership looks like. Obviously, all these guys are going to garner some, but there may be some small edges that we can glean from it. Looking over, we've got Giannis. He's 11-2 on FanDuel, but with the other Bucks, the Middletons, the Bledsoes of the world, DiVincenzo, all of them. Do you like these guys as secondary plays, or is it just Giannis from the Bucks and then move on to the other 5 games?
I think that it's pretty much just Giannis. Looking at the pricing on the other guys, Middleton is at 8,300 on DraftKings. You've seen his price kind of elevate because of the games that Giannis missed, and it's the same for Bledsoe. So with Giannis in the lineup, I think it's pretty tough to get to either of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, we saw right before the break, Giannis had the baby. Obviously, those guys became massive chalk, massive usage. We know all that now that they're back in a spot like this. I'm pretty much with that as well. I don't see a ton to really get to. So you want to move on to the Heat Hawks?
Yeah, and I would like to clarify that I won that tournament fair and square because I did math wrong, and
Okay.
the guy in second would have only gained 5 points, and I won by 7. So,
But you would lose some street cred with the 7-point victory.
yeah. Only winning by 2 wouldn't have looked as good.
Yeah, it's not even screenshot worthy. All right, Heat, another road favorite. 6-point favorite over the Hawks, 230.5 total. This is a good game. We're gonna have some things to talk about. We can start with the home team. Trae Young. On a slate like this, it's kind of interesting. I don't want to say he's in a dead range because he's not, but you just have so many other top end guys to pay for, and then you have balance looks that would omit him when you talk about Simmons, Lavine, guys we'll get to. What do you make of him to start? And then we can talk about, of course, Collins and the rest of the Hawks.
I think Young is really interesting because, like you said, it's not that it's a dead range, but I think that there's a good chance that his ownership comes in really low. Trying to pull up now to see if our ownership projections are up, but with him being priced kind of in between Westbrook and Harden in really good matchups against the Warriors, and it being a tough spot for Young against Miami, I think that there's a good chance that people just kind of go to those other options, or go to Yanis in that price range as well. And so I think that Young is obviously not an optimal play, because you should be going to all of those other guys before you get to him, especially to Harden and to Giannis. But he still has a monster ceiling. He still plays huge minutes. He's averaged over 1.5 fantasy points per minute in games that John Collins has played this year. Right now, we only have him at 5% ownership on DraftKings, compared to 34% for Westbrook, compared to 24% for Harden, 28% for Giannis. I mean, you're talking about a 6-game slate where it's reasonably difficult to make good pivots. And I think that getting a huge ownership discount on Trae Young does put him into large field tournament consideration.
Yeah, I mean, it's a guy that, kind of just to speak to what you just talked about, his ceiling is right up there with anyone. It's just how often he's going to get there. Now, if you get the ownership discount, you can justify making that play, especially in tournaments. Over on Superdraft, he is just flat 1x. That's a tough sell with Harden right there. Just an injury note, no surprise. Capella not going to be playing. What do you make of Collins? Because he's somewhat expensive in my opinion too. 8,700 on DraftKings, whereas he 78 on FanDuel. Do you think he fits in? I mean, obviously it's early in the morning, but with my builds, I had a tough time getting to him. It didn't really fit what I was trying to do.
He's just really expensive for this matchup, and I agree with you. I think it's really tough to get to him.
Yeah. Anything in terms of the cheapies? Someone like Dedmon at center, 4,800. The minutes have kind of been there, here and there. Don't mind it as a punt, or are you not on that wavelength?
I would say he's my second favorite option from the Hawks behind Young. The problem that I think you'll run into as we go through the slate is that there's a few center options at the top / in the mid range that I think are underpriced and in really good spots, including Bam Adebayo on the other side of this game. So the opportunity cost is pretty high, and it is a tough matchup for Dedmon. The one positive thing that I would point out is that you got about 28 minutes for him off the bench, or 33 minutes in an overtime game. Then you got 28 minutes. Last game he started, only played about 17 minutes, but he was in massive foul trouble in the first half. So don't read anything into the minutes there. I fully expect 28 to 30 minutes if he's not in foul trouble.
Yeah, and if that's the case, like I said, I don't mind that if you need a punt filling at the center position. Herder on FanDuel, 4,600. We know that he's not going to get there on efficiency. It's more of a volume thing with the minutes. He's going to play a lot. Do you have any interest there? Or again, 6 games, you can get away from something like that?
Yeah, I mean, 6 games, I think that I can just get to other spots. Like there's value in other games. There's faster paced / worse defensive teams in other games. So it's not really that appealing.
There you go. On the other side, I think a lot of people, we've already seen it in our premium chat talking about Bam, 7,800. This guy is very, very good. I assume that he's towards the top of your list. You already alluded to him. What do you make of him at 7,800?
Yeah, I think it's a really good price point for someone that you expect to play somewhere in the 34 to 36 minute range. He's averaged just shy of 1.2 DraftKings points per minute in games with Jimmy Butler this year. And you get a pace-up spot against Atlanta. You get a really weak Atlanta defense. Bam is also nice because he's not the highest usage guy. He has a 19.9% usage rate in the games that he's played with Jimmy Butler this year, but he picks up assists, he rebounds, he really just does everything well. And so that gives you a pretty high floor since he's not scoring dependent and since he can get there in a variety of ways. And it also still gives you the really high ceiling where, yeah, he's unlikely to go out there and score like 35 actual points, but he gives you triple double upside from a ceiling standpoint. He a good chance at a double double here. So I think that he really benefits from the extra possessions that you'll get against the Hawks because he contributes in so many different ways.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that's going to impact that ceiling. 7,800, really good price. He's going to be popular. Our first run has him around 25%. We'll see if we pump that up since we both like him to 50%, 80%. Who knows? What about the rest of the Heat? Jimmy Butler, Dragic. I think these guys are fine. Bam would certainly be my preferred target in the game.
I think Butler's actually my number one guy from Miami, mostly or in large part because of positions, just because he's not taking up a center spot. But also, I think that 7,900 on DraftKings is just too cheap for what should be around 33 minutes from Butler. I think that, he's for the season in 46 games with Bam, he's averaged 1.24 DraftKings points per minute. You should get a little bit of a bump because of the matchup. So I think he's just another really high floor, high ceiling guy here.
So do you anticipate playing lineups with both of them, maybe stacking this game, looking at Trey on the other side?
I'll definitely have lineups with both of Butler and Bam. The fact that this is only a 6-point spread in favor of Miami and that the game is in Atlanta, I'm not going to be overly concerned about a blowout and, be limiting how much of, or making it so I don't get Bam and Butler together or anything like that. I think I'll probably get a lot of both since they both look like two top plays for me.
Yeah, I mean, the Heat are a team, and not that this is a huge deal, but they've been unstoppable at home. One of, if not the best in the league. I don't have them in front of me, but I know that, and not nearly as effective on the road. So going into the ATL, we'll see what they can do. In terms of, the secondary options for the Heat, are any of these guys some possible salary relief for you when you talk about Dragic, Crowder, some of the secondary options?
It's kind of tough because with Iguodala and Crowder being there, even with Tyler Hero being out and Myers Leonard being out, the minutes are pretty flat for a lot of these guys, and the salaries have come up a little bit. With it being the Hawks, you certainly could take shots in large field tournaments on guys like Jay Crowder or Goran Dragic. Kendrick Nunn's only 4,900. His minutes have been down, but the flip side of that is if he plays really well, maybe he gets extra run at the expense of Dragic or something like that. So, with it being the Hawks, you can certainly rotate those guys in, but I see it as a pretty big gap between the Butler Adebayo range and then the rest of Miami.
Okay, so it's just pretty much premium. For the Heat, I think I'm more in line with that or not. And as I say, anytime I'm on the morning strategy show, we'll see what opens up. I know we're coming off an all-star break, so guys should be a little more defined of where they are injury-wise. If something opens up, if a guy sits, you're going to have a lot of value. It will open that much more. You won't need to force in, salary relief, mid-range guys like these Heat players. Anything else from this game? We got 2 down, 4 to go.
No, I think that covers it.
All right. Next one up. Eesh. These teams got Hornets, 5-point dogs going into Chicago, 210 total. That is the lowest on the slate. Thanks to Chicago. Not the best matchup. Bad teams. I guess we can start with the Hornets. We've got Devontae Graham, Terry Rozier. Interesting guys in the backcourt. Graham at 7,500 on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, he is, I don't know where he is. I can't find him. He's 6,700. That's actually pretty appealing. What do you make of the Hornets in not the best matchup?
Yeah, overall, the pace of this game shouldn't be very appealing, and the Hornets as a team obviously aren't really that appealing. I think that a $5,700 price tag on Terry Rozier is pretty solid. He missed their last game, but he's not on the injury report coming into today, so he should be good to go. And you look at the price difference between him and Devontae Graham; they're pretty similar in terms of per minute production, especially if you kind of discount the hot start that Devontae Graham got off to this year and expect him to be more of the player that he has been recently. There's not a huge gap in their playing time. There's not a huge gap in their production. There shouldn't be a nearly $2,000 price difference on DraftKings between the two. So I think Terry Rozier looks like a pretty solid value at that price point. Still not a priority, but kind of in that like Goran Dragic mold where he's a perfectly fine play. Like if I end up with 5,700 at guard, I'm not upset that I'm getting to Terry Rozier. Beyond that, PJ Washington's cheap. Who knows what kind of production you're getting out of him? But at 4,500, not the craziest play. Guillermo Hernan Gomez has been in the rotation, normally playing like 17 to 19 minutes. He's only 3,400, but again, you do have the opportunity cost at center. It gets pretty tough to allocate that position to someone that you're not expecting to even reach 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, there's Zeller there as well, who I think he's good to go tonight, unless I'm wrong. But PJ Washington, he has been playing a decent amount of minutes now. He's not the best player in the world, putting it mildly. 4,500. Yeah, I could get down with that. We talked about, so do you like him or Dedmon? Just going back to the Hawks, because it's a similar price tag.
I would give the slight edge to Washington because he's power forward eligible.
Okay. There you go. Another guy on the Hornets. Again, this is not a good team. I think we all know that. You have any interest in Bridges? The minutes have been there. That's about all I can really say. Fairly priced in my mind. Doesn't really move the needle for me.
Yeah, it's pretty tough. I mean, his usage has come up a bit recently, and that's kind of occurred as Devontae Graham's has gone down. But Bridges' salary has jumped as well. Whereas you're looking at really solid price points on guys like Rozier and PJ Washington. Bridges is priced up, and even just going through like the small forward or power forward positions, you're going to get to guys in his price range that I think just look a little bit better. Whether it's Robert Covington or Jaren Jackson or Bielitsa, there's a lot of options in that price range that I like a little bit more than Bridges.
Yeah, Covington is a guy that stuck out to me. Even not that I'm in love with Bruce Brown, but he's there as well, and we did talk about him. So that does make it a little tricky. Anyone else on that team? Again, the Hornets are not. This is not an appealing game. Malik Monk, anything like that for you? Or you have a lot of guys. Just looking at this team as a whole, they're all pretty average salary in terms. They're not a stars and scrubs team. It's just a lot of guys at a middling price tag. It makes it hard to prioritize.
Yeah, and because of recent injuries, you've kind of gotten some of the price tag jacked up a little bit. Malik Monk is someone that is going to play in that 26 to 30 minute range, but he's kind of priced to play 30 minutes now at 5,400. So it's really tough to be getting to him when you can pay a little bit more for like a Goran Dragic or a Terry Rozier.
Yeah, fair enough. Even though it's only 6 games, and I was said at the beginning, we don't have a ton of like injury news. The Bulls are absolutely decimated still. I mean, these are not new injuries, but most of these guys are still out. Chris Dunn, of course, Hutchinson, Porter, Lowry, Carter. It's going to open up a ton of minutes. We're going to have massive ownership on some of these guys. I guess we can just get into it, right? Starting with the backcourt. We've got Kobe White, 4,700. We have him priced. We have him as one of the more popular plays looking at the first run of ownership. Shaq Harrison is a name. He is the flat min on DraftKings. I definitely want you to speak to him. And then, of course, Zach Lavine at 9,200, a premier option despite the price tag.
Yeah, I think this is pretty obviously where the value is coming from, at least right now. It's not like it's the best players in the world, but and it's a really slow Charlotte team, but it's not a good defensive Charlotte team either. And as you said, the injuries are just really piling up for this team. You've had Porter and Dunn and Markkanen and Carter all being out. Denzel Valentine's out, so that's another body. But then the really big change is that Chandler Hutchison is now out as well. He had been starting for Chris Dunn. He was playing around 30 minutes a night, filling in, and so now you have 30 minutes that need to be soaked up by an already shorthanded group of wings and guards. So I think that you see more run probably for Ryan Arcidiacono into the low to mid 20s. I think that Kobe White gets a little bit more run, whereas you were normally getting him around like 26 minutes, backing up Satoransky and then getting some minutes behind Hutchison as well. I think that you probably get him up around 30 to 32. And then Shaq Harrison, who obviously it's terrifying because it's Shaq Harrison, but they just don't really have that many options. And Harrison can play multiple positions. He's the most likely candidate to fill in for Hutchison. So I think that expecting somewhere around like 28 to 30 minutes from Harrison is perfectly reasonable. And at 3K, it's just really tough for him not to pay off that salary.
Now, if that's the case and everything lines up, say we don't get new value, what are you going to do with a guy like that in the sense that he could be, I mean, astronomically owned? He's an obvious play. He's going to open up. He's going to correlate to Yanis. He's going to correlate to Harden. I know you're going to be running a bunch of lineups. How do you come in on something like that? Like, do you just lock him and say, I'll take a slight leverage on 65%, or do you come in maybe even underweight?
Normally, when we're talking about a 3K guy who I think has upside at his price point because of the minutes he's going to play, and because Harrison really isn't an unproductive player. He's around like a 0.8 or a little bit higher per minute guy. So we're not talking about like Terrence Ferguson playing increased minutes here or something like that. Normally, I just end up overweight on that guy and just kind of figure it out elsewhere, because for one, I think that he's just a really good value and a good play. It's not he's there and I guess he kind of fits, I'll use him. But also, there's not really pivots around him that are even remotely comparable. If you look down at the 3K range, like there's just such a big difference between $3,000 value and $4,000 value in terms of what you can pivot to. Back to running on DraftKings, he's guard and forward eligible. So pretty much anything you could point to make you want to get Harrison in your lineups, he checks the boxes, and so I assume I'm going to end up just with him pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, and listen. Obviously, I come from golf, NFL, other sports where it's just different. There's higher variance. There's no minutes. And there's just more ways to pivot. In a situation like this, of course, anything can happen. But as you mentioned, he checks so many boxes. There's not a straight pivot. It can be tough. It's a very aggressive stance. If you come in radically underweight on him in the front court for this team, I actually find myself liking Thaddeus Young a bit. He's kind of, a guy, he always has like a decent floor. I don't really tap into his ceiling too much. 5,400 though. I think he's going to play some major minutes. What do you make of him at another, mid-range price tag?
Yeah, he's another guy that I would throw in that category where we were talking about Miles Bridges, and I said that there's a bunch of small forwards and power forwards in that price range that look better. I think Young's one of them too. He's reasonably priced. He's only 5,400. You should get 32 to 34 minutes from him. He's around a 0.8 to 0.85 fantasy point per minute guy playing with the starting unit. Obviously loses some usage because of Zach Lavine, but makes up for that in increased minutes. So that combined with a really weak Charlotte front court in terms of defensive abilities, I think it looks good for Young, at least from a floor standpoint, and really just grading out as a 5 to 6x medium projection.
Do you have any interest? I mean, we've talked about the injuries. They're just estimated up and down the roster. Are you going to look to someone like Kornet? Or is that just a pass for you for center?
I think a lot of like someone or guys like Kornet, it comes down a lot to ownership, because he certainly has upside at 3,700, but like right now he's getting 22% ownership, and I only expect him to play normally around 24 to 26 minutes. You have Daniel Gafford back, I believe not on the injury report anymore. You have Felicio, normally playing backup as well. So I think that there is upside for Kornet, because again, it is a good matchup against the Charlotte front court, but I'm just not really sure. He's different for me than like Harrison, where Harrison is $700 cheaper, which when you talk about their pricing is like 30% less, and he's easier to get into lineups because he's guard and forward eligible, whereas Kornet is center and power forward eligible, and using him at center isn't really that appealing. So much less excited about Kornet than someone like Harrison.
There you go. And yeah, I don't know how often you're going to need double punting value with the Bulls. That would really open it up. I mean, I guess if you want to get crazy aggressive, try to get Yanis and Harden in. It's one way to do it. I don't think that's how I'm going to go tonight. Anything else? I mean, like I said, this is a short roster. There's not much to talk about. Pretty projectable because they just don't have enough bodies.
Yeah, the other point, it goes with what you just said about, paying up for two of the studs. That's obviously an approach you can take because, nobody's gonna tell you not to roster both of Giannis and Harden or something. But there is a really kind of underpriced mid range, whether it's Butler or Bam or Embiid. There's a lot of guys in this like $7,000 to $9,000 price range that have 50 plus fantasy point upside. So I think that if you're looking at a roster decision as like a 2v2 or a 3v3, and it's something along the lines of like Harden plus Cornette or, Butler plus whoever,
Bad young.
De'Aaron Fox or something like,
Mhm.
I'm going to prefer those two mid-range guys.
Do you think, just to put a bow on that, do you anticipate or do you think it's viable to start, like, in terms of your highest purse guy, be Zach Lavine tonight?
Do I
Or
think
is that too much opportunity cost in the sense of going, say you go very balanced. You have like a Lavine, you throw in Butlers, Foxes of the world. Your highest guy is 9,200. Or do you think you might need a Rocket, Giannis, Trey?
Oh, okay, yeah. So not Levine specifically, but like
Okay.
someone in that price range.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fine. Obviously, Harrison being there makes it a little bit easier to, kind of get above that. But I do think there's enough there. I mean, obviously, without making a lineup or anything, but like just thinking about getting to, like a Butler, Bam, Fox, Embiid, Harrison, fill in two other cheaper guys, like 5K guys. That's still a really high upside lineup because all those guys, Levine, Embiid, going down a little bit, but Bam and Butler and Fox, like these guys all have 50 to 60 plus fantasy point ceilings.
The next game, Brooklyn, the Sixers, Philly at home, where they are certainly much better. 8-point favorite, 215.5 total. And this is another game that, for the most part, you're not going to have the top end guys. We do have Simmons and Embiid. They're both sub 10K. You have Simmons at 9,500. I think that's, again, I don't want to say dead range, but to me, that's truly the awkward price with all those guys that you just rattled off. And then we have the superstars on the slate. I have a tough time getting to Ben Simmons here. I don't love it. I get it pays up, but still at 9,500, what do you do with him? And then the rest of the 76ers?
It's really tough for Simmons here, I think, because obviously he comes with a really high floor because he plays a million minutes and because he contributes, like we were talking about with Bam. Simmons, not the highest usage guy, but he's involved enough offensively and he picks up assists, he picks up rebounds, all that. But he's not underpriced at all. And there are a lot of underpriced guys on the slate. So it gets really, really tough to get there. Brooklyn is a fast paced team, but they're not bad defensively either. So it's not like it's, the Wizards or something like that, where you're expecting Simmons to produce at a much higher rate than normal. So basically, you're talking about a guy that is going to, on average, produce 1.1 to 1.15 DraftKings points per minute at a price point where he's more expensive than guys like Embiid and Lavine, amongst a lot of other guys, going even cheaper like Butler and Bam. So it's just really, really tough to get there, even if you are factoring in that he'll probably be low owned.
Yeah, he's over on Superdraft 1.15x. I don't like that there. You can go get Westbrook for 1.1. And to me, there's a big enough gap in all things. Even with and ownership will dictate some of it, as you talked about, but it's probably not going to be enough for me to go to Simmons over some of those other guys. At the center position, though, Joel Embiid, I expect full go in terms of minutes. I don't know, you're a lot sharper than that than I am. 9K seems pretty appealing if you do want to pay up at center.
Yeah, I think it's really appealing for him because, for one, it's a pretty nice matchup. It's a pace up spot, and then also a Brooklyn front court that we've seen, good centers have plenty of success against. But also, I think it's worth pointing out, this will be the second game that Al Horford comes off the bench for Philadelphia, and we obviously don't know exactly how that rotation is going to work. But in the first game, you only got about 28 minutes from Joel Embiid, so maybe people kind of look at that and think that, for whatever reason, Horford's going to cut into his minutes. Right now we have Embiid projected as the second highest owned guy on the slate, so it doesn't seem like we think that's going to be the case. But either way, Embiid was in some foul trouble in the first quarter of that game. I still expect 31, 32 minutes from him in a competitive game. So I don't really have any concerns about Embiid here.
Over on FanDuel, 9,600. I don't mind him there. with the rest of the Sixers, you've got Tobias and the rest of the guys. Anything, or are you sticking similar to what you talked about with the Heat, where it was Bam and Jimmy Butler? Are this more just Embiid, or do you find some value here with Philly?
I think that Harris is mildly interesting because he should get more rebounding opportunities now with Horford coming off the bench. You have Harris playing the 4 instead of the 3. So I think that his rebound should go up. He's around the 22% usage guy in games that Joel Embiid plays. So he takes a little bit of a hit there compared to when Embiid is out. But you're still expecting 34 or 35 minutes from him. I think that more of a secondary option, but someone that you can get to.
And then maybe I missed it, but you mentioned Horford coming off the bench. Do you have any interest in him specifically at 5K? Obviously, I think it's pretty simple to say don't play him and Embiid together. But do you have any interest in going there over guys like the Deadmans of the world that we already talked about?
If the ownership gap is big enough, especially because you can get Horford at power forward instead of center, which I think is important. But the flip side of what I said about Embiid playing, being a little bit of foul trouble last game, you got about 28 minutes from Horford there. I think, at least based on the way that rotation ran, I think that it's more likely you get like 25, 26 minutes from Horford in a normal game. And this also isn't a Brooklyn team where I would expect Brett Brown to be playing more Horford alongside Embiid for matchup purposes, since you're talking about Taurean Prince and Wilson Chandler playing the 4 for Brooklyn. So I'm expecting around 26 minutes for Horford.
Yeah, and at that, for me, I'd probably take the 500 and even roll the dice with like PJ Washington if I had to, who we already talked about. Other than that, yeah, I mean, Tobias, this is where on 6 games you do have, reasonable amount of guys that you can go elsewhere. And for me, Covington, who we haven't gotten to, and some others, kind of take them out. On the other side of this game, not the best spot for the Nets. Honestly, it's a team, Kyrie not going to be there. What do you make of them? I mean, I'll just open it up. Is there anyone that appeals to you on the Nets side?
Pretty much 2 guys, and it's Dinwiddie and Levert. It's not like it's a great matchup against Philly. Only a 105 team total here for Brooklyn. They're 8-point road underdogs at Philadelphia, but you still have Kyrie out, and that means more minutes for Dinwiddie and Levert. It means more usage. It means more assist opportunities. Dinwiddie has taken a bit of a hit with Levert back. His numbers with Kyrie and Levert out were much better than his numbers with Kyrie out and Levert in, but he's still only 7,300, and he still is more productive under these circumstances, still around a 30% usage guy in games that Kyrie's been out and Levert has played. So I think Dinwiddie still looks like a pretty good option. I do think that I would lean towards someone like the Aaron Fox at 7,400 or John Morant at 7K. So that'll make it a little bit tough. And then Karis Levert, should lead the team in usage. He can be frustrating the roster because he's not the most efficient scorer, and even within good games, he'll give you some really ugly stints on the floor where you start to get nervous about him. But the minutes, he should play 33, 34 minutes, assuming that the game is competitive. The usage rate should be up over 30%. He's going to play most likely whatever minutes Dinwiddie's not on the floor. He'll get more ball handling responsibilities, more assist opportunities, and his price tag hasn't really come up. So I think that especially on DraftKings where he's guard and forward eligible, which makes it really easy to get him in the lineups, Levert looks like a pretty good option.
Yeah, he's a staple of a lot of different type of builds. If you go super balanced, he's firmly in that. If you go stars and scrubs, you're still going to need a couple guys in the mid range, and he is one of them. 1.75x over on Super Draft. I think that's very appealing. There's certainly a ceiling there for him. And I do want to say real quick before we move to these last 2 games, if you haven't signed up for Awesemo Plus, we'd love to have you guys in. We still got plenty of NBA. Baseball apparently isn't starting. Who knew? Good for that sport. Golf, the best DFS sport, as Chad is talking about, is where you should. NBA Strategy is the promo code. You get 50% off your first week. Come and try it out. You see our ownership, the projections, office hours, ship my money, personal DMs. Can't put a price on that. All of these things you need to come and check out. But on the Nets side, what else we got? Yeah, I mean, no interest in that front court going against a brutal matchup with Embiid.
Not really, just because you're seeing, for one, the pricing on Jordan and Allen. It's not expensive, but it's pretty much where I think it should be. And you're seeing their minutes split a lot closer right now than it had been previously. I think that there's a pretty good chance, especially in this matchup, that you see Jordan get, similar minutes to Allen as well. So I'm pretty hesitant. There were times earlier this year where you could kind of project like 29 or 30 minutes for Allen and 18 or 19 minutes for Jordan. But based on how they've been running their rotation recently, and based on the fact that they have to deal with Joel Embiid here, I'm expecting more along the lines of like 24-24 or 25-23. And if that's the case, it doesn't make either one look that good.
Yeah, that's super cannibalizing. I think I'm with you. All right. This is my favorite game to talk about on the entire slate. Grizzlies, 1-point road favorite over the Kings, 229.5 total. There's a ton to talk about. The first thing is, and this is not related really to DFS, the Grizzlies, they're going to have a chance to go in the playoffs. So it should be pretty surprising. Credit to Ja Morant, certainly, for that. What do you make of them in this spot? I mean, we have Ja at flat 7, Valanciunas 7,100, Jackson 6K. There's some options up and down when we even Clark. You mentioned that you do like Ja. Where do you put him in the priorities at point guard?
I think he looks really good. And I just started looking at the ownership for Memphis, and if their ownership holds where it is right now, I think they're going to be an incredibly appealing team in tournaments because, and it makes sense on one hand, like if you are just going position by position through the slate, you kind of don't mention Memphis that much. Like when Dan and I did the podcast last night, we go by position, and at every position it was kind of just like, oh yeah, this guy is there, he's fine if you get to him. But there was nobody where it's just like, oh yeah, that's like the top option in his price range or whatever. And but the thing is, it's not because they're not in a really good spot against Sacramento. It's not because they're not really good or underpriced. It's just because there's other slightly better options. But you look at Ja Morant, for example, at 7K, he's projected for 3% ownership right now on DraftKings. And one thing that I think is really worth pointing out with him, and I think it affects his ownership and it also affects why his salary is so low. If you go and look at his recent games, his minutes really aren't, like they look inconsistent. They look low. 32 and 35 in his last two, but prior to that, 28, 31, 27, 27, 27, 30. It's easy to, with someone like Morant that kind of was having his minutes limited earlier in the year, it's easy to kind of look at that and just get and be nervous about it and think, oh, Morant is just not playing a lot of minutes. But you look at those scores, and Memphis just went through a stretch of games where they weren't in competitive games. In the closer games, you got a 14-point game against Dallas where he played 31 minutes, a 7-point game against Portland where he played 32, a 7-point game against Washington where he played 35. I don't think there's any reason to be expecting less than 32 or 33 minutes from Morant, assuming that this game's going to be competitive. And I think that medium projections probably are a little bit lower than that by a couple of minutes, which means that it's probably gonna be a really good spot to get over the field.
Yeah, I mean, just to look at that, there were major blowouts in there, and it does feel like a buy low spot. We know the volume's going to be there with the shot attempts, of course, the assist rate. They need, if they're going to make the playoffs, and I don't personally think they will, even though they have a little cushion, they got to win games like this. These are the type of games that they can't afford to lose, even though it is a borderline pick 'em with them as a slight favorite. So you like Morant. What do you make of someone like Jackson in the front court or Valanciunas, who are both, I think, somewhat appealing against a Kings front court that we'll get to that has a lot of injuries?
I think that they're both a little bit less exciting to me than Ja Morant is,
Mm-hmm.
but I still think that with Jackson right now at 4% ownership and Valanciunas at 1% ownership, they're still guys that have really high ceilings for their prices. Valanciunas, his only real issue ever is his playing time, and recently we have seen the minutes come up to where earlier in the season it was kind of like 24 minutes was his baseline, and in good games you got 28. Now it's more like 27 or 28 is his baseline, and in some matchups or just games that go favorably for him, he's getting north of 30. This matchup's kind of scary because Sacramento has been very willing to go small and run Bjelica at the center, in which case you could get more Brandon Clark for Memphis. But if you're expecting around 28 minutes for Valanciunas, he's well over a fantasy point per minute guy, up at around 1.2. It's still really easy to see how he has a monster game here. And if no one's going to roster him on a 6-game slate, then it's a high upside, tournament winning type play. And the same goes for Jaren Jackson, who he's seemingly always in foul trouble, which keeps his minutes lower than we would like in a lot of games. But in games where he's not in foul trouble, you're normally getting 32 plus minutes. And so he's just a really volatile player, which when you have a volatile player that has a wide range of outcomes, with a really high ceiling, but his price is more for his medium projection, and his ownership is going to be down because people are scared off of his medium projection. That gives you an opportunity to, just get again a really high upside tournament winning guy at low ownership and a really appealing game.
So, I just want to go into that for a second because I think it's interesting. You mentioned that say that the Kings go small with Bielitsa at center. Do you think that you'll build maybe to correlate someone like him and Clark together, trying to with this game? Because I do think there's a lot of scenarios depending on how one team there's a domino effect. Will you try to decipher it like that and pair some of these guys up, hoping for the right script?
Yeah, I think that it's always kind of risky because a lot of times you have coaches kind of just do whatever they want to do, and
On feel, yeah.
yeah, um, Memphis has tended to be hesitant to play Valanciunas if they're going up against a center that's going to shoot threes and really pull Valanciunas out. The most notable was we saw him only play like 21 minutes in a game against the Pels because the Pelicans Favors was out and they just ran Nicole Homelli out around the 3-point line for like the entire game. So you had Valanciunas, off the floor. The thing is though, like I don't know. I wouldn't want to make a rule that says if I have Valanciunas, I don't want Bielitsa. I wouldn't say if I have Bielitsa, I don't want Valanciunas. I just don't feel that confident that they affect each other's minutes. I think the most likely rule that I would make is that if I have Brandon Clark, obviously I don't want Valanciunas if I have Clark, but if I have Brandon Clark, I think you could consider making a rule that you have to have Bielitsa because it probably means Bielitsa is playing a bunch of minutes at the 5. But even that, I'm not super confident in just because it kind of feels like maybe it's overkill. Like just having a low owned Brandon Clark as a tournament guy is probably fine on its own. I don't know that you need Bielitsa in every single lineup that you have Clark.
There you go. Yeah, I think little things like that, are something to explore. But you're right. Ownership can dictate that as well. Like you don't need to hitch all your wagons to something because if you get paid off on Clark, you kind of want more permutations. It would be a killer to get that right and then have Bielitsa bust, and you don't have any outs based on it. But on the Kings side, Holmes, Bagley, Len, all out. So that's going to open it up for Bielitsa. Harry Giles ? What do you make of the Kings front card? I think we should start there just because they're so thin.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's an absolute mess. In their last game against Dallas, they started. Yeah, they started Bielitsa at the 5 in that one. Giles came off the bench, played 20 and a half minutes, which is more than he was getting as a starter normally. So that was interesting. I don't really know what to make of his minutes. If you expect around 20 minutes, then he's kind of in that like Willie Hernangomez range where he's a productive enough player. He's going to give you a decent medium projection for his salary. The problem you run into is just, does he actually have the minutes upside to, potentially get you like 30 plus fantasy points? And I think that's pretty tough. So kind of it's a value option if you need it, but I think that there's definitely better value on the slate. I think the Bielitsa is still appealing just because he's power forward eligible, but most likely playing center. It is possible that they go back to Giles as a starter here because of Valanciunas. It'll be interesting, to see how this lineup looks. But overall, it's just you shouldn't really have confidence in the front court guys here. It is an appealing matchup if you kind of want to throw darts at like Bielitsa or Giles, but neither of them stand out as top options for me.
Yeah, 5,300 for Bielitsa over on FanDuel, 59. And I think that's it. If you have a good core and you need someone in this range, I feel pretty comfortable throwing these guys in. I think somebody could really return major value. It's just there's also a lot of landmine potential. The backcourt, I think, is a little clearer, but of course they're priced up. I mean, De'Aaron Fox is going to be a staple of my lamps tonight, 7,400. Then you've got Buddy Hield. I know you mentioned Fox earlier. I elaborate on him, and then do you like the 3-point champ in Buddy Hield?
Yeah, I think Fox looks great. He's just underpriced for a guy that should play, 33, 34 plus minutes. He's around a 30% usage guy. He gets a ton of assists. It's a good matchup against Memphis. Actually, I take that back. Memphis has actually been playing really well defensively. It's a good matchup in terms of pace. So, and it's obviously a healthy 114 total here. So everything looks good for Fox, or most things at least look good for Fox. Heald is interesting because, for one, we've seen that even though he's coming off the bench, when he plays well, he's still able to get 31, 32 minutes, which is nice. He is the second highest usage guy on the team, but also Memphis over the stretch where they've been playing really well defensively. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm pretty sure going into the All-Star break that over the last month, Memphis had been the second most efficient defense behind only Milwaukee. But they've been protecting the rim really, really well. They've not been as strong defending the three-point line, which of course sets things up really well for Buddy Hield. So Fox is the number one guy here for me. Hield is number two, and then it's a pretty big drop to anyone else.
Yeah. De'Aaron Fox. Like I said, like I'm in all formats, 1.3x on Super Draft. Feel fine about that. And then just, yeah, I mean, looking honestly, he's just clearly above guys like Devontae Graham, Spencer Dinwiddie for me. We mentioned Ja in the same game. I mean, Butler's kind of different. So he's going to fit a lot of different builds, similar to what we're talking about for me with Karis LeVert, where if I go balanced, Fox is obviously going to be in there. If I go stars and scrubs, he could still be, that secondary option in that type of build off of Yanis, off of Harden, off of Westbrook. Anything else on that, or do you want to move to the last game?
No, I think that's. I mean, I guess you kind of have to mention Bogdan Bogdanovic too, just because, he has the potential to play around 30 minutes and he's pretty cheap. The thing that scares me with him though is that he does really take a hit when he's playing more minutes alongside De'Aaron Fox, which is obviously the case when he's starting. So I think that while Hield's production doesn't really change going from a starter to the bench, Bogdanovic's does change going from the bench to starting, and so I think that even though he is cheap, it is an appealing game. You can kind of just make the argument of, well, any cheap players playing 30 minutes in this game have value. He's not going to come through often enough for him to really be a priority for me.
All right. Yeah, I think for me that really kind of encompasses it all. Last guy, we just had a question from Chad about Jabari Parker. Supposed to make his debut, 3,700. Anything there, or is that just a wait and see, not necessary?
Who knows?
Yeah.
I think that. All right, so if we look at the last game Sacramento played, Anthony Tolliver played 17 minutes. He's garbage. Daquan Jeffries played 3 first quarter minutes. That gets us 20 minutes. Bazemore played 28 minutes. I think it's pretty it's realistic that you could see around 24 minutes from Jabari Parker. It's also realistic you could see 12 minutes.
He's at least
right. He's at least productive enough where at 3,700. Okay, so I'll put it this way: he's 3,700. Luke Cornett's 3,700. I think that there is more upside, especially if ownership is similar or if Parker is lower owned. There's a better chance Parker wins you a tournament than Cornett wins you a tournament.
But for me, I'll take it one step further. I agree with that. But is there a better chance with the $700 increase over the mega pivot off Shaq Harris?
I'm operating under the assumption I just have Harrison.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that's safe. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I give Parker 24 minutes, he looks like a really good play. If I give him 20 minutes, he looks good. You're basically, if you roster Parker, you're basically just trying to avoid him barely playing. If he gets anywhere close to from here on out, I would expect him to be a low to mid 20s minutes guy. If he immediately is inserted into that role, then I think he's a really good value here. We don't really know what's going to happen because the Kings front court was already a mess, and now you just threw another body into it.
The one thing, my final thought on that, I totally agree. The one problem I have just in a tournament setting is I don't know how wrong you could be in a good way, in the sense of where the ceiling is with the minutes. It could be a buy low spot if there's room for that, but I don't see how he gets above what we're hoping will be relatively low 20s.
I think he could get to 26 if he's playing well.
Okay, so that's higher than I thought he could get to.
Well, I mean, so let's say Tolliver DNPs, because that had been a thing not too long ago. Mm-hmm. And so that's 17 minutes there. Take off the 3.5 minutes or 3 minutes that Jeffries played, and you're at 20. Bazemore doesn't have to play 28 minutes. Corey Joseph played 24 minutes. Like the Kings have such flexible pieces, position by position. Like Parker can get minutes if he's playing well, and they're not opposed to giving him more minutes. So I think that he at least could get to like 26. I don't think it's the most likely outcome.
Yeah, that's God, man, Jabari Parker. That's a name that really haven't been thinking about too often. That'll be an interesting one. I don't think he'll be popular. Ownership, check back on that. You're doing, I believe, the deep dive with Laffy later.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you'll have many more insightful comments on your boy.
Basically,
Jabari.
it's a play you shouldn't have any confidence in, but if you're just throwing darts in large field tournaments at cheap guys, Jabari Parker is the type of guy that you want to do it at.
Yeah, that is true. So it's an interesting name, that's for sure. It does add a wrinkle to the slate. Last game, it's used to be a premier game. Now it's still interesting for fantasy purposes. Rockets 10-point road favorite against the Warriors, 234 total. This is where, of course, we've got the big guns. We've got Harden at 11-3, Westbrook at 10-2. Gonna both be very popular. I'd assume Harden is more popular. I like him in a vacuum, but I don't mind going and taking the savings. We can start there with the two superstars for the Rockets.
I'm really surprised by our ownership projections right now, because on DraftKings, Harden is only $1,100 more expensive than Westbrook. But we have Westbrook projected for 34% ownership compared to 24% for Harden. Maybe it's just a product. I haven't made lineups yet. Maybe it's just a product of it being pretty tough to find that $1,100. In which case, I think Westbrook is still fine. But normally, it's seemed like this season when their prices start to kind of converge and get to the same price point, you get a pretty big disparity where Harden's really popular and Westbrook's not. So I think, I mentioned it last night, and I think it's the case still. Harden is clearly the top projected guy between the two. His production has come down a bit recently in games with Westbrook, I think in part because of his injury, but also in part because teams are looking to, get the ball out of Harden's hands and force Westbrook to beat them. But you still have such a large sample of Harden being the guy. And so I think that he's the better projection. But if ownership does start to sway in his favor, when you consider that Westbrook is lower owned and that their ceilings are really, really comparable, even though Westbrook's per minute production isn't quite as good, it wouldn't take much for me to start to prefer Westbrook.
Yeah, I'm surprised at that as well. I thought that we would see that kind of flipped, and there's still plenty of time. Other than them, Covington, it's a name that we've thrown around already for the show. He's 5,500 on DraftKings. He fits a lot of builds, small forward, power forward eligible. Going to play a lot. I mean, the Rockets rotation right now is so tight, playing so small. What's not to like? Talk about him and House, who are two options that I think will garner some interest.
Yeah, I expect Covington to be one of the highest owned guys on the slate, and I think it's for good reason. You're getting a bunch of rebounding opportunities for him in the small ball lineup. You're getting he's not a high usage guy, but he never is. But you're getting good looks for him because he's playing with Westbrook and with Harden, so his efficiency should go up a bit from 3. Everything just looks good for him, and I think the price tag's too low for the minutes that he's playing and the role that he has on this team. So I think he'll be one of the most popular guys on the slate. I think that's for good reason. Daniel House is a little bit cheaper. The minutes probably not quite as high. Pretty much everything is lower, I think, for House. Lower projection, but lower usage, lower rebounding numbers, probably a little bit less playing time. So he's less interesting, but still, viable. Same goes for PJ Tucker, who's only 4K. Will be hanging out in the corner for probably 35, 36 minutes tonight, hoping some balls bounce to him and he can get rebounds.
Eric Gordon's got a Q tag, 3,900. I assume minimal, if no interest there for you.
Yeah, 39 is kind of the 3,900 is a mark where he would start to become interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He's just really, really, really useless when Westbrook and Harden are both healthy, because D'Antoni staggers the minutes for Westbrook and Harden. So no matter what, Gordon's on the floor with at least one of them. Sometimes he's on the floor with both of them. And if he's on the floor with just one, his usage is okay. It's like in the 20% range, but he still doesn't get rebounds and he doesn't get assists. If he's on the floor with both of them, then he doesn't even get usage. So he's really someone that is always really, really good or projects really, really well, I should say, if one of those two is out. But when they're in, it really hurts. So if he's in and you expect around 30 minutes at 3,900, it's an okay value, but I don't think it's one of the top values on the slate. And I do think that there's enough, other guys that you can get to that I would prefer.
Before we move to the Golden State side, we did a quick question from chat. Do you think Ericsson has more value at point guard or small forward with him being double eligible? For me, it would be small forward just because I like a ton of guards. What about you?
Yeah, small forward. I mean, at point guard, if you don't even include Harden, but you still have Westbrook, you have Young, you have Jimmy Butler, who no longer has forward eligibility on DraftKings. You have Fox, you have Dinwiddie, you have LeVert, you have Morant. Kobe White is another point guard. So you have Jordan Poole as value from the Golden State side of this game too. So I think pretty clearly more valuable as a small forward.
Yeah, I think so. All right, last team, the Warriors. It's a good environment. They're a sizable home dog. A lot of Marquise Chris talk in Slack, in YouTube chat. Other guy, you got Draymond Wiggins. What do you make of the Warriors here in a game that could produce obviously a lot of fantasy production?
Yeah, it's an appealing spot. The thing that's tough for me is that Marquise Chris is up to 6,200. He should play 30 to 32 minutes. He's a productive player. It's just he's only center eligible on DraftKings. It's okay. I think I would rather try and find the money for like Valanciunas or Bam. The guy that I think Jordan Poole is a pretty good value. They've already said that he's starting at point guard again tonight. He played 32 minutes against Phoenix as the starter last time out. He should get some scoring opportunities, and he's cheap enough where you're not taking a really big risk of him busting at that price. Andrew Wiggins looks like an okay option. It's kind of similar. I expect similar production for Wiggins to what we saw in Minnesota. He actually was a little bit less efficient actually a lot less efficient without Towns this year. And now you once again have him on a team where he's really the only legitimate scoring threat. So I don't expect him to be very efficient, but I do expect him to get pretty much all the opportunities in the world. And he's pretty cheap. So I think that Wiggins is my top, like just mid-range guy from Golden State, and the Poole would be the top value for me.
So someone like Wiggins, 7,600 over on DraftKings, do you prefer him or someone like Jimmy Butler, a couple $100 more?
Butler, assuming that there's not like a huge ownership gap. We have Butler at 23%. We have Wiggins at 22%. Yeah, so it would be Butler for me right now.
Okay. Yeah, because that's really where you're looking in terms of, 1v1s if ownership is the same. I think I lean to the Heat side as well. Anything else from Golden State? It's weird. It's a team that I felt like I should have got more from. It's not that I hate their plays, but I didn't see a ton that where I was like, all right, this is a priority. If I end up with some of those guys, it's fine. But at the same time, I'm not building around them.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. It's more of, if going into like the last game of the night, I see that I have, one player left and it's one of like 7 different guys on Golden State, I'm not going to be surprised. But I don't think that I'll have like tons of any of them. One reason is that while the salaries are fine, they're not really underpriced, I don't think. But also it's really scary because we talk sometimes about, like downside risk for minutes and, based on rotations and stuff. On a team like Chicago, where there's not really that many bodies, there's only so many ways really that it can go wrong, where a guy that you think is going to get, 30 minutes plays 22 or something like that. Golden State is consistently running 11-man rotations right now. And that's not to say that you shouldn't expect 30 to, a little bit more than 30 minutes from the main guys, Wiggins, Chris, Lee, and Poole. But they certainly don't have to give it to him. Steve Kerr, it wasn't that long ago, someone asked what he expected out of his rotation, and he said, I don't really know. I'm playing it by ear. We'll see how it goes. So it's not like a lot needs to happen within the game for Steve Kerr to say, oh, this really not good NBA player is going to play the minutes instead of this really not good NBA player. So the amount of bodies they're playing makes it pretty scary.
Yeah, I mean, guys, and it's a lost season. I think everybody knows that. So they can do things. I know we've seen like Looney is going to be, there's just a lot of guys that cannibalize, and it makes it tough. Whereas some of those injury-ridden teams, the Rockets, of course, there's just physically not that many guys they can go to. So you can't get it that wrong. Anything else, 6 up, 6 down, not too bad. You can go bask in your NHL glory. I do want to ask, are you going to continue to play NHL?
Yeah, I'm gonna at least try. I registered today. My only concern is that I don't know how easy it'll be to juggle the lock time, but NHL is similar to baseball for the most part in that you can kind of get your stuff done ahead of time and have to make minimal adjustments. So I think I'm at least trying to do both. And one other follow up on NHL is that I continued to research that scoring change, and DraftKings had it right.
Sure. Yeah.
I thought that they took away a goal that I had, but really they just added an assist to a guy that I had. So, yeah, they got it right.
So now it's in Sharpie, officially the winner. Congrats to that. I do want to say, as I have throughout the show, Super Draft, if you guys haven't signed up over there, go and do that. We've got Adam, Lofty, I believe it's Sal and Fast Eddie, but we've got it back in business with all the shows today. Tomorrow, your favorite, you got Lofty and Josh. I believe he's eating the chip. So you will want to see that on the NBA Strategy Show tomorrow. We will be in full swing. Obviously, you're going to find me in the golf world early and often. But any final thoughts, or are we good to go?
I think we're good to go. I'll be back with Lofty at 5.
All right, beautiful. Thanks again, chat. On your way out, if you can hit the like button, we really appreciate it. It's good to be back. We love to see you guys. If you have any questions, comments, you can find us. But good luck, everyone, and we will all talk to you soon.